Well, let's go into some spicy territory for tonight. This is Project Cars 3. My name appears in the credits of this game as one of the QA guys, and this is a game that hasn't received much coverage at all. And a lot of that I feel is quite justified. The Project Cars franchise was originally started as a crowdfunding campaign to build a hardcore racing sim by the people, for the people. So when it was announced that P-Cars 3 would push the franchise in a more Forza Horizon style direction, none of the content creators that would have covered this game, that probably should have covered this game, were even remotely interested in it, and honestly I can't blame them. I personally don't really understand who this game was for. Steam charts, I'll put an overlay on the screen here. The numbers are not good at all. But I will say that even games that aren't received very well can still do some stuff right. We're in the customization menu here with my Mazda RX-7. It's one of the DLC cars. And the customization options in this game are pretty solid. You have a livery editor similar to what iRacing offers, where the game gives you a ton of preset designs and you just pick the color palette. So here I'm making basically what's a Mark Martin Valvoline car. You're given a number plate editor with a ton of different number plates to pick from. You're given the option to change your tire sidewalls. You can change your rim design, your rim color, your rim size. You can change the text of your license plate on street cars. You can change the design of your license plate. And there are a ton of sponsored decal slots, both big and small. You can make a car that looks like a big-time professional racing series car with a giant primary sponsor. Or you can opt to just use the small decal spots and make something that looks like it's out of a regional racing series. This is available on every car. This is the best customization I've ever seen in a racing game. Because again, as much as I enjoy using proper livery editors like what you would see in Need for Speed or Forza Motorsport or The Crew 2, it's faster and easier to spit out something that looks nice with preset designs and sticker slot options. As you'll see here, this car really only took about a minute or two to put together, and the results I'm pretty happy with, and it looks natural on the track. It fits in with the other race cars that you'll see on the track at some point. And one of the things that a lot of people don't mention when it comes to this game, because again, there's so few people covering it, and a lot of people just kind of enjoy the performative criticism surrounding it, which again, hats off to you guys. I would have done the same if I was in your position. They give you a ton of decals to select from. I mean, it's easy to just get lost scrolling through all the different categories. They give you colored, black, and white versions of pretty much everything under the sun, including the fictional logos from the original Project Cars games when they didn't have a lot of licensed brands to put in the game. Each of the 4 DLC packs also added more and more stickers to the game. Like, as someone who enjoys making their own car, but not wanting to spend, the hours in like a Forza-style livery editor, even though I know how and I can, this is just perfect for me. This is exactly what I want from most modern racing games, so it's nice that this game got this right, and hopefully in future games, whatever they end up releasing down the road, they just use this exact customization screen, don't change a thing. I do wish you had the option to mirror stickers. For example, when I apply the zip and wheel sticker to the right side door, it doesn't automatically send that sticker to the left side door. I have to manually do it. So I hope that gets cleaned up. But one thing you can do here is you actually can save the exact style, the tire sidewall, the number, everything, and apply it to different cars. So if I want to run the same Valvoline livery on, let's say, like a GT3 car, I can. I just save it and then apply it to the new car. Of the 10 people who bought this game, some of you are probably wondering how I have the RX-7 so early in the game. If you do buy all the DLC in this game, the DLC events are available right at the start of career mode. Usually, for the first time user experience, you're locked into the handful of Road E events, but the DLC events, for whatever reason, are also open. So what you can do is you can take one of the starter cars and start going through one of the DLC tiers that allows the use of Road E cars, and gain like 8 times the amount of XP than you would going through the initial tiers of career mode. So I made a lot of money quite early. I sold the Mitsubishi Lancer you start out with, bought the RX-7, and have been going through the game with that. So what ends up happening is I'm entering the first true race of career mode, which is a night race in Shanghai, with a car that is extremely overpowered. Right off the bat, we've got some problems in the GUI. My car thumbnail is not appearing because I'm using a custom car livery. And the default field of view is not great, so I have to hit the Control-K debug command and then press minus on the keypad, which is a shortcut to fuck with the in-game camera. Minus on the keypad zooms out the field of view a bit. So this is P-Cars 3. This is what it looks like. And for starters, I agree with 95% of the criticism levied against this game. Don't get me wrong on that. A lot of you guys had very articulate points and made very good arguments as to why this game shouldn't have gone in this direction. There's also some traditional ISI/Madness Engine AI weirdness going on in front of me with the AI cars weaving like that. But I do want to bring up a really interesting counterpoint that I've not seen anyone talk about. What about this game, at least what I'm showing you right now, is any different than Project Gotham Racing 4 or Drive Club? I mean, just look at what we're doing here. We're in an exotic location, on city streets, racing street cars, earning XP, doing short little sprint races. This is PGR3. This is PGR4. This is Drive Club. Those games traditionally sold quite well. They scored quite well. And we haven't had one since Drive Club was released in either 2014 or 2015. And of course, we haven't had a PGR game since, I believe, PGR4 in 2007. Those two franchises, if you can call Drive Club a franchise, are two extremely beloved racing series that people have been begging for a sequel for upwards of a decade. They really do just want a game with a handful of popular cars, some cool street tracks and neat locations, and sprint races with the ability to earn XP. That's all those games boil down to. And that's really what P-Cars 3 is. It's just a spiritual successor to the PGR games or to Drive Club. It's also worth mentioning that as much as people claim to not like the NFS Shift games from the early 2010s, there's a lot of evidence that people actually liked them and enjoyed them and played the shit out of them anyway. They both sold really well, and on top of that, if you ever went to nogripracing.com back in the day and checked out the number of mods released for both NFS Shift 1 and NFS Shift 2, it was by far the most popular game on the site. The reality is that a lot of racing sims are really exhausting to play, and Shift 2 kind of filled the gap for people who wanted to just drive for 20 to 30 minutes at a time, in an environment that let them progress and do silly shit and customize cars and earn money in a more gamified environment. Basically, what I'm getting at is there was actually a tangible market for Project Cars 3. A lot of you actually wanted this game. Every time you go on the forums and say, hey man, I miss the PGR games, I miss Drive Club, I miss the Shift games, you were asking for something like this. Those comments, those forum posts, those retrospective videos on the old franchises, stuff like this gave SMS the idea that something like Project Cars 3 was something the people actually really wanted. Now, why, at least in my opinion, are there only 50 people playing this game on Steam at the end of the day? I think it just boils down to execution, really. First of all, let's take a look at what made the Shift games great. The Shift games were really cool because they provided this atmospheric side to sim racing. You had these obnoxiously loud engine sounds and tire skidding sounds. You had this really claustrophobic cockpit camera view. You had these really moody menus that were dark and gloomy, and they played a lot of like symphony remixes of stuff like Rise Against and Biffy Clyro. None of this stuff, for whatever reason, made it into Project Cars 3. And as you can see from just cruising through the results screen right here, the menus kind of look like just a generic mobile game. The engine sounds are kind of muted. They're not great or intense or kind of, over-ambitious like they were in the Shift games. The cockpit view isn't as violent. And there's a lot of Fortnitification that nobody really asked for. You have the avatars of the player and some of the AI drivers prancing around in Victory Lane afterwards. You have a lot of XP bars, probably too many XP bars, and car levels, and driver levels, and challenge completion statuses for its own good. So even though this game, when you compare just the raw modes and features on paper with NFS Shift game, they're identical, the soul that made NFS Shift really cool to play is just not here. The second major issue, I think, is content curation. P-Cars 3 really doesn't have an identity like Project Gotham Racing does, like Drive Club does, like the NFS Shift games did. All three of those games start you out driving street cars, and the fastest cars in the game are hypercars and supercars and one-off concepts. There's also a very carefully selected list of tracks. With the Shift games, it's a lot of fantasy tracks mixed with the FIA GT1 schedule. With PGR, it's almost exclusively city streets, as well as the Nürburgring, and I think the Michelin test track was in PGR4. And then with Drive Club, it's basically like, what pretty locations can we put people in that show off the PS4's processing power? P-Cars 3, by comparison, really just takes 95% of the content from P-Cars 2 and adds like 20 new cars. So if you own P-Cars 2 already, why not just play P-Cars 2? You also run into issues where a large part of the car list in this game, at least in career mode, isn't actually used. So like you can save up a bunch of money to buy a Dallara IR18 Indy car in this game, but because the career mode in this game is focused solely on the progression from driving street cars and then upgrading them, and then eventually finding your way into high horsepower GT stuff, there's literally no reason to buy it. I think this game could have done significantly better if a lot of the fat was trimmed, and instead of just trying to recycle as much content from P-Cars 2 to inflate the car list, if P-Cars 3 curated the content so it was exclusively street cars, hypercars, concepts, and maybe a single class of GT3 and GTE cars at the end of the game, people would understand what this game was trying to accomplish a lot better. The same can be said for the track roster too. Tracks like Bannockbury, which we're on right now, are really fun and kind of emphasize the spirit or the identity of what this game was trying to achieve. But when you load the rest of the game with too many real-world tracks, like Bathurst, like Watkins Glen, like Sears Point, I'm just more inclined to go play P-Cars 2, because all of the cars and all the tracks are in that game too, and I have more control over the driving experience. But if you curated the track list to be exclusively stuff like the Nordschleife, stuff like Bannockbury, stuff like the Monument Canyon Fantasy Track, stuff like the Shanghai and Havana Street Circuits, the game as a whole would feel a lot more like PGR 3, like PGR 4, like Drive Club, and people would get what you were trying to sell to them. It also doesn't help that this game was sold at full price, which made people think it was a mainline entry in the series as opposed to like an arcade offshoot, so I would have probably halved the price in addition to the content curation of just street cars and hypercars and fantasy tracks, and I probably would have changed the name too. I think between Project Cars Revolution, which made the rounds on a bunch of news sites like GT Planet, and was mentioned in the Madbox concept art, I think Project Cars Unleashed, or even something simple like Project Cars World Tour, all three of those would have made more sense than calling it Project Cars 3, but I don't get paid enough to make those decisions, so as far as I'm concerned, that's not my problem. And it's frustrating because, you know, at the core of this game, it's really not terrible. There were a couple slight physics refinements. It drives completely fine with a wheel. I don't have any issues with it in that regard. It just needed better content creation and a slightly better art style, and you guys would be all playing this. It's basically PGR4. It's basically Drive Club. It's close, but not quite to Shift or Shift 2. Those are all games we all really enjoyed. We like, even as sim racers, the ability to just pick up a game that feels somewhat realistic and blast through a campaign mode and earn XP and buy cars. It's fun. It's a nice change of pace from like serious sim racing leagues. It just seems like a few small design decisions here and there had kind of a butterfly effect across this game. I might look into learning how to mod this game so I can curate the car list and the track list to my specific requirements and turn it into something that closely resembles what it should have been launched as, but that might take a bit of time. I'm not quite familiar with boot files, so I might have to ask around. But yeah, that's a taste of Project Cars 3. That was the last 2 years of my life, if not more.